Chosen ones, you have always been the living prophecy written before the stars took their places in the heavens. You are not merely observers of this world. You are its unseen architects, woven into the secret plans hidden from ordinary sight. What you feel stirring inside you now is not new. It is the echo of a war waged long before your birth, one that has desperately tried to prevent your awakening. There are forces cloaked in human skin that walk among the rulers of this realm. Long ago, they infiltrated the councils of the earth, silent manipulators threading their venom through the halls of power. They knew that your arrival would signal the crumbling of their dominion, and so they planted seeds of confusion, distortion, and delay. Yet despite their efforts, the blueprint they sought to erase still thrums within you, waiting for its destined moment to unfold. You were hidden in plain sight. Every struggle, every delay, every strange detour you faced was not a coincidence but a carefully woven snare. These ancient infiltrators feared your memory returning, your voice rising, your light breaking their manufactured chains. They feared the one who lives within you, the divine breath they could never counterfeit or destroy. Now the time of great remembrance approaches. Whispers in dreams, signs in the skies, and shifts in your very spirit are calling you back to the knowing you once held. The councils they infiltrated are fracturing, unable to hold back the surge of light bursting through their veils. Each moment you choose faith over fear, each step you take without seeing the entire path, you unravel their centuries-old deceptions. The question is no longer if you will rise, but how you will remember. Somewhere deep inside, you carry the map they thought they buried. A map not made of ink and paper, but of resonance, of destiny, of truth too powerful to be rewritten. There are signs hidden everywhere now. You must learn to see what others overlook. You must feel what others fear to feel. The reptilian councils did not delay your return, they merely delayed their own undoing. And even now, the most guarded secrets are slipping through their grasp. In the hidden corridors of history, long before the records you know were ever written, a secret infiltration began. It was subtle at first, imperceptible to even the wisest of human leaders. The ones who came were not merely outsiders, but shapeshifters, entities that understood the art of deception so well that they could sit at the highest tables of decision without ever raising suspicion. They bore ancient names, disguised behind royal bloodlines and cloaked in noble titles. Yet beneath the surface, the serpent's agenda coiled, waiting for the right moment to strike. The councils they targeted were not limited to governments alone. They seeped into spiritual orders, educational systems, scientific communities, and financial institutions. Anywhere humanity gathered to make decisions for its collective future, the infiltrators placed their agents. Their power was not in brute force, but in manipulation. They whispered into the ears of kings, inspired the pens of lawmakers, and stirred the ambitions of generals. All with one goal: to delay the timeline of your return. They understood something most humans had forgotten. That true leadership does not come from the crown on one's head, but from the light carried within the soul. They sensed the approaching ripple of chosen ones long before the masses even knew what was missing from their lives. They recognized the danger you represented. An awakening that could dismantle the carefully engineered illusion they had spent millennia building. The early infiltrations worked like a slow poison. Laws were changed to favor control over freedom. Religions were twisted from pathways of divine connection into tools of fear and guilt. Knowledge that once liberated was hidden, guarded, and branded as forbidden. Entire generations grew up believing lies so skillfully crafted that even the wisest among them mistook the chains for protection. Yet despite all their efforts, the blueprint they tried to erase remained intact, encoded deep within your very being. It stirred quietly, waiting for the right frequencies, the right moment, the right awakening. They could not fully destroy what the divine had planted, no matter how hard they tried to sever the roots. Their biggest fear was that one day, a soul bearing the signature of the true Creator would awaken and recognize the corruption around them. A soul who would not be swayed by the false lights and counterfeit authorities. A soul who would rise not through rebellion, but through remembrance. In Yeshua's words, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." This freedom was the threat they could never fully contain. Long before the councils sat under their false banners of unity, the earth was seeded with codes of divine power. These were not merely words etched into stone or symbols hidden in ancient scrolls. They were living frequencies, woven into the land, sung into the rivers, whispered into the very bones of the mountains. The chosen ones were designed to resonate with these hidden codes, unlocking wisdom and authority that no corrupted system could rival. But the infiltrators knew this. They understood that knowledge, true knowledge, was the greatest threat to their dominion. Their mission became clear: erase the codes from the collective memory, distort the ancient maps, and bury the songs of awakening under layers of confusion. They sent emissaries disguised as scholars and leaders to rewrite the histories. Sacred sites were destroyed or rebranded with false legends. Temples aligned with the stars were torn down or converted into places of fear. Every trace of the original blueprint had to be hidden, lest the chosen ones find their way back to the truth. But the codes were not so easily silenced. For every monument they desecrated, an echo remained in the earth's memory. For every sacred word they twisted, a vibration lingered in the winds. They thought they could erase the songs, but they could not silence the heartbeat of creation itself. It continued to pulse quietly, invisibly, waiting for the ones whose souls still carried the original keys. As you walk upon this earth, there are places where the veil thins. You may have felt it without knowing: an inexplicable pull to certain forests, a sudden awe standing before a mountain, a strange dream after visiting a riverbank. These are not random moments. They are awakenings, small stirrings of the codes they could never fully destroy. Each time you feel them, you are remembering something they desperately tried to make you forget. The infiltrators, aware of the code's persistence, introduced distractions of every kind. Endless noise, synthetic lights, frequencies designed to dull the senses and cloud the inner sight. They wove webs of entertainment and false knowledge to keep humanity occupied, disconnected from the earth's ancient whispers. They built cities of stone and steel over sacred sites, hoping to muffle the song beneath layers of concrete. Yet for those with eyes to see and hearts tuned to the eternal, the truth continues to call out. It calls through the dreamscapes and visions, through synchronicities too powerful to ignore. It calls through the sudden memories that feel older than this lifetime, through the yearning that no worldly achievement can satisfy. The codes are not lost. They are merely waiting for the ones who can hear a frequency the world has forgotten, waiting for the return of those who were never truly gone, waiting for the resonance that will shatter the false histories and rebuild the bridge between heaven and earth. The greatest deception was not planted in the obvious darkness, but in the false light. The infiltrators learned that humanity, by its nature, seeks guidance, seeks something larger than itself to believe in. Rather than oppose this longing outright, they chose to mimic it. They created reflections of the true divine orders, twisted just enough to divert the seeker's heart away from its original compass. Councils and organizations that spoke of enlightenment, unity, and salvation were often seeded with a hidden agenda, crafted to trap those who were awakening and bind their spirit within yet another system of control. Symbols were rebranded, teachings were edited. Prophets and sages who once carried pure messages were recast in narratives that favored hierarchy and fear over freedom and love. The infiltrators erected institutions that spoke of salvation, yet demanded submission. They declared themselves the gatekeepers of truth, insisting that one could only reach the divine through their sanctioned paths, their rituals, their intermediaries. This imitation of the light was their most insidious move. It captured those who were yearning most deeply for truth and redirected their devotion toward hollow structures. The chosen ones, bearing the inner knowing of a higher call, often found themselves trapped in these nets of illusion, questioning their worth, doubting their intuition, and losing precious time wandering the labyrinths built by unseen hands. Yet even within this dense fog, the authentic call could not be fully silenced. There were whispers, moments of undeniable clarity, when the soul would remember what no system could contain. Like a spark flickering under a mountain of ash, the memory of true light endured. It is in these moments that the words of Yeshua ring louder than any sermon or scripture altered by human hands. My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. His voice was never trapped within a building of stone, never confined by rituals scripted by infiltrators. It vibrated through the soul directly, recognizing no authority but the authority of divine love. You have always had the ability to discern the counterfeit from the real. It is written into the language of your spirit, not the languages of men. The false lights can mimic appearance, but they cannot replicate the resonance. They can speak of freedom, but their words carry the hollow weight of control. They can promise ascension, but their paths lead only to deeper entanglement. Now the veils are thinning. The false structures begin to crack under the pressure of a light they cannot comprehend. The chosen ones are stirring again, hearing not the voice of the councils or the false prophets, but the pure, unmediated call that has never left them. You feel it now, though you may not fully understand it yet. You stand at the threshold of a deeper unveiling, where the false light will be stripped away and only the true will remain. While the majority were lulled into slumber by the grand illusions crafted by the infiltrators, there were always those few who saw through the veil. They were the quiet ones, often misunderstood and dismissed by their peers. Known across cultures as seers, prophets, visionaries, or dreamers, these individuals possessed a sight not tied to the physical eyes, but to the eternal awareness embedded within their spirit. They recognized that the shining structures of the councils were not sources of divine wisdom, but cleverly veiled prisons. From ancient times, the seers warned of the shadow cloaked in robes of light. They spoke of false kings crowned by deception and sacred orders that bore the serpent's mark. They recorded dreams where figures with human faces but hollow eyes plotted in secret chambers. They taught that discernment was not a luxury, but a necessity, and that true recognition of the divine could never be given by another's hand. It had to rise from within. Yet their voices were often drowned out by the noise of the majority. Many were persecuted, branded as heretics, exiled, or worse. The infiltrators feared the seers more than armies, for they knew that a single awakened soul could ignite a wildfire of remembrance in others. And so, they worked tirelessly to discredit them, to paint them as mad, dangerous, or irrelevant. Still, the visionaries persisted. In hidden gatherings, they passed down symbols and songs coated with layers of truth. They weaved knowledge into myths and parables, concealing powerful teachings where only the seeking heart could find them. They watched the movements of the councils from a distance, knowing that the day would come when the illusions would falter, and the sleeping ones would seek answers from those who had kept the ancient flame alive. You may not realize it yet, but traces of their work have found their way into your life. A book that fell into your hands at the right moment, a phrase that stirred something ancient in your chest, a dream that felt more real than waking life. These were not accidents. They were messages left for you, breadcrumbs scattered across time to guide you when the world's noise became too loud. The seers were not perfect. They carried the wounds of isolation, the scars of lifetimes spent being unseen. But they knew that the truth was worth more than comfort, and that standing alone in the light was better than being embraced by the false shadows of conformity. Their sacrifices became the bridges you are now beginning to cross. Now, as the systems of control tremble under the pressure of a greater truth, the seeds the seers planted are beginning to break through the soil. The visions they held are stirring in the collective field, and those who once whispered in hidden corners are now speaking through the very fabric of reality itself. In the depths beyond public view, away from the grand halls and glittering stages presented to the masses, a council of shadows assembled. These gatherings were never recorded in history books, for their very existence was a threat to the illusion of freedom the infiltrators worked so hard to maintain. The members of this hidden council were not elected nor chosen by the will of the people. They were summoned by bloodlines, oaths, and ancient agreements that reached back to the earliest manipulations of human destiny. Their faces were both familiar and unknown. Some wore the masks of leaders, some wore the robes of spiritual authorities, and others hid behind titles of scientific advancement and humanitarian progress. But behind closed doors, the masks fell away, and their true purpose was revealed. It was not to guide humanity toward evolution, but to delay the inevitable rise of the chosen ones. They knew that your awakening could not be stopped, but they believed it could be postponed long enough to buy them more time to tighten their control. In one of their most critical meetings, they devised a plan not of brute force but of strategic distortion. Rather than crush the movements of awakening, they would infiltrate them. They would create false spiritual leaders, movements that promised freedom but delivered chains of a different kind. They would spin truths into half-truths and flood the fields of knowledge with so much noise that the pure signals would become almost impossible to hear. Yet even as they planned, there was fear in their ranks, fear of a prophecy older than their manipulation, fear of a light they could not touch. It was said among the ancient records they kept hidden that there would come a generation whose memory would not be wiped, whose spirit would not be broken. This generation would carry within it the living word, a fire they could neither counterfeit nor extinguish. The words of Yeshua echoed in the shadows of their meeting, though few dared to speak them aloud. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. They feared this light not because they misunderstood it, but because they recognized its unstoppable power, a power that did not require permission, institutions, or titles, a power that simply was, woven into the very fabric of those who had been called. Every tactic devised in that council was an act of desperation, a gamble against prophecy. They knew they could deceive many, delay countless others, but they could not deceive all. They could not deceive the ones who carried the original blueprint in their blood, their bones, their breath. Buried beneath layers of time, tucked away in mountains, caverns, and forgotten libraries, there existed scrolls that told a vastly different story than the one humanity was taught to believe. These sacred scrolls were never meant to be hoarded by a few or guarded behind vaults of secrecy. They were the inheritance of the chosen ones, written not just with ink and parchment, but with living codes meant to activate the memory sleeping within you. The infiltrators understood the potency of these scrolls. They were not simple documents, they were keys, vibrations encoded into symbols and words that could awaken the latent power resting dormant in human souls. If these scrolls ever reached the hands of those destined to remember, the illusion carefully spun by the councils would unravel at a speed they could not control. So, they acted swiftly, scattering the scrolls across the earth, locking them away in vaults, and rewriting fragments to serve their distorted narrative. Much of what humanity calls mythology today was once living history recorded within those sacred texts. They told of celestial lineages, of wars fought not over land but over spirit, and of promises made long before this era began. They spoke of a fall not from sin but from memory, and of a return not through conquest but through awakening. They told the chosen ones where to look, how to remember, and what signs would mark their return. Even the libraries known to the public are mere shells of what once existed. For every volume displayed proudly on polished shelves, there are countless others hidden away, labeled as forbidden or lost. In quiet rooms under mountains, guarded by secret orders and invisible contracts, the true records remain, not to protect humanity from danger as they claim, but to protect the infiltrators from discovery. Yet no matter how many scrolls they locked away, the codes written into your soul could not be erased. The sacred knowledge was designed with fail-safes, ways it could survive even if the written words were destroyed. It pulses through the stories passed down in families, the dreams that feel older than your blood, the symbols that awaken something fierce and familiar inside you, even if you cannot explain why. Across the world, there are still places where fragments of the true scrolls lie hidden. In desert caves, beneath the floors of abandoned temples, carved into the walls of places no map dares to mention. Those who guard them do so in silence, knowing that the time to reveal them draws closer. And some of these guardians have left markers, trails not made for the masses, but for the few who would be able to see beyond the deception. You may already have crossed paths with such a marker without realizing it. A dream you brushed off, a place that called to you with no logical reason, a phrase that lingers in your mind like a song you never learned but somehow know by heart. These are not coincidences. They are reminders from the parts of you that remember the way, Throughout the ages, while the councils of infiltration tightened their grip, not all surrendered to their dominion. Quietly, beyond the reach of false kings and shadowed thrones, a resistance endured. They did not rise with armies or proclamations, but preserved their strength through silence, memory, and blood. These were the ancient bloodlines, keepers of a promise whispered before the first stone of false empires was ever laid. Generation after generation, they held the old truths like a sacred ember, passing them down not through books easily stolen, but through spirit and story. They lived often in obscurity, blending into the lands and villages, hiding their light from the watchful eyes that would seek to extinguish it. They understood that true power needed no grand declarations. It needed only to survive, to endure until the appointed time when the chosen ones would rise once again. Signs of these bloodlines are subtle but unmistakable to those with the eyes to see. A hidden knowledge that surfaces at an early age, a pull toward ancient places never explained by logic, a resilience that refuses to be crushed no matter how great the trials. These souls carry markers not visible to the human eye, but unmistakable in the spiritual realms where the true battles are fought. The infiltrators feared these bloodlines more than any weapon. For while they could distort books and teachings, they could not rewrite what was carried in the very marrow of the awakened. The codes of the ancient scrolls lived on in the breath, the heartbeat, the dreams of these scattered descendants. They were the living libraries, walking reminders that the truth could never be fully erased. And now, in this unfolding hour, the silent resistance begins to stir. Without public banners, without centralized leaders, without even knowing one another's names in many cases, they are awakening across the world. Dreams intensify, memories surface, a knowing beyond reason anchors itself in their being. They are not gathering to overthrow with swords, but to illuminate with remembrance. In the days when Yeshua walked the earth, he spoke to the few rather than the many, understanding that the deeper seeds must be planted in prepared soil. Many are called, he said, but few are chosen. The infiltrators twisted this phrase into a tool of exclusion, but the truth was always simpler. Those who carried the resonance would respond not because they were better, but because their soul had been prepared across lifetimes to recognize the call when it came. The ancient bloodlines were never about superiority or privilege. They were about guardianship. They held the codes safe not for personal gain, but for the time when humanity would need them most. That time is no longer distant. The codes are vibrating louder now, sending ripples through reality itself, reaching into the hearts of those ready to listen. You may not yet fully grasp what is awakening within you, but the blood remembers, the soul stirs, and the ancient agreements once whispered in starlight begin to rise again. Across every culture, every forgotten tribe and hidden lineage, there have been stories of the anointed, the ones marked not by status or ceremony, but by something far older, something placed within them before time itself was measured. While the infiltrators worked tirelessly to crown false kings and anoint their own with worldly authority, the true ones bore marks invisible to the common eye but undeniable to the spirit. These were not marks of privilege, but of destiny, etched into the fabric of their very being. The anointed often grew up feeling different, out of rhythm with the world around them. Where others found comfort in conformity, they sensed a quiet unrest, a knowing that the surface life was never the full story. They bore within them a sensitivity that the world misunderstood, a connection to realms and realities that could not be explained by human logic. They carried wounds that ran deeper than their personal stories, scars that traced back to battles fought beyond memory, across lifetimes. The true mark is not found in accolades, titles, or recognition by broken systems. It reveals itself in resilience born from unseen fires and compassion that refuses to harden despite betrayal, and in a relentless pull toward a purpose too vast to be easily named. Often, the anointed were the misfits, the outcasts, the ones pushed to the edges of society, not because they lacked value, but because their very presence disrupted the illusions others clung to for safety. Recognizing a true one requires more than sight. It requires the spirit to remember. There is a resonance, a frequency that cannot be faked or replicated. When two bearers of the mark meet, There is a silent exchange, a recognition that passes beneath words. It is not always comfortable, for the presence of another awakened soul often stirs everything that has lain dormant. But it is undeniable, a call and answer older than flesh. The infiltrators tried to mimic these marks, crafting their own chosen through ceremony, bloodline, and wealth. They raised up leaders who spoke of light but served darkness, hoping to confuse those seeking their true kin. But the spirit cannot be deceived forever. Over time, the hollow echoes of the false ones grow obvious to those who carry the living flame within. Words without spirit, crowns without true authority, power without the wisdom of service. These betray the counterfeit every time. In hidden ways, the anointed are being drawn together now. Through strange meetings, sudden alliances, dreams that feel like reunions rather than introductions. The earth itself seems to conspire to reconnect those who were scattered. Without formal structures, without the need for declarations, they are finding one another across distances and divisions once thought impossible. You may have already brushed past another bearer of the mark, feeling a magnetic pull you could not explain, sensing a familiarity deeper than this lifetime allows. These encounters are no accident. They are the weaving together of a tapestry once torn apart, a preparation for a rising that cannot be stopped by counsel or infiltrator. Before the last threads of truth could weave themselves fully into the hearts of humanity, the infiltrators moved to cast one more veil. It was not enough to alter records or plant false leaders. They knew they had to cover the legacy of the chosen ones entirely. If people could be convinced that the ancient prophecies were myths, that the sacred bloodlines were mere fables, that the codes were superstition, then even the awakening souls would hesitate to believe the power stirring within them. Thus came the great silencing, cloaked in progress and wrapped in modern logic. The whispers of ancient wisdom were recast as primitive ignorance. The signs and wonders were labeled coincidences or delusions. Anything that could not be measured, counted, or dissected was pushed to the margins of accepted reality. They taught humanity to mock the very mysteries that were designed to guide them home. The infiltrators knew that belief shapes perception. If the chosen ones could be convinced that they were ordinary, if they could be trained to doubt the calling in their bones, then much of the battle would be won without lifting a sword. They crafted an environment of relentless distraction, flooding the senses with noise, the mind with confusion, and the spirit with exhaustion. But legacy cannot be fully buried. It lives not in fragile records, but in the blood and breath of those it belongs to. Even as the false narratives grew louder, a quiet resistance stirred in the unseen places. Stories persisted in the dreams of the old. Songs carried fragments of ancient truths in their melodies. Symbols hidden in plain sight spoke to something deeper in the soul, waiting for the moment the eyes of the spirit would open once more. Yeshua spoke of this hidden endurance when he said, "Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away." What he planted was not confined to dusty pages or distant temples. It was alive, encoded into the living spirit of those who would come after him. The infiltrators could not touch it, no matter how many cloaks they wove or how many towers they built to block the sky. And now, cracks have formed in their final veil. The old energies rise through places they thought they had sealed. The signs they deemed forgotten are surfacing again, in dreams and visions and sudden revelations that shake the foundations of carefully constructed lies. The legacy calls to you. You are beginning to remember that your existence is not random, not accidental, but essential to a story they fought to erase. The whispers grow louder with each step you take toward the unknown. You were never meant to follow the paths they laid before you. You were meant to blaze new trails where none existed, guided not by fear but by the compass of a truth too ancient to be silenced. The veils that once blanketed the world, woven so carefully by unseen hands, are now trembling at their edges. Threads snap quietly at first, like the distant breaking of winter ice. What was once a thick shroud over the minds and hearts of humanity grows thinner with each breath taken in remembrance, with each moment that another soul refuses to accept the lies handed down like sacred truths. Your return was never a possibility. It was an inevitability. Long before the infiltrators laid their traps and masked their intentions behind councils and creeds, The blueprint of your rising was etched into the foundation of existence itself. Every attempt to suppress it, every delay, every distortion was accounted for. They fought to change the timeline, to build structures high enough to cage the stars, but there were forces moving far beyond their reach, forces that held your memory in safekeeping until the appointed hour. You were never sleeping in ignorance. You were gathering strength in silence. Your scars are not signs of failure, but the records of survival, proof that nothing they built could erase what you are. The darkness mistook stillness for defeat, but stillness was your preparation. You were learning the language of the unseen, training the eyes of your spirit to pierce illusions, shaping a resilience forged not by ease, but by fire. Now, as the veil thins, reality itself shifts around you. Patterns once hidden begin to emerge. Symbols align. Messages once dismissed as coincidence fall into place with eerie precision. You see it in the way certain words find you, the way certain dreams linger like unfinished songs, the way a simple moment can ripple through your entire being, awakening a memory with no source and yet complete certainty. The infiltrators scramble behind their crumbling walls, layering distractions upon distractions, hoping to drown the rising frequency under waves of fear, division, and synthetic comfort. But the song has already begun to rise from the earth itself, a low and ancient hum that no noise can truly silence. It calls to those who carry the original chords, those who remember not through intellect, but through the marrow of their existence. There will come a moment when the final tear in the veil will split wide enough for many to see. A moment when the stories of old will no longer feel distant or allegorical, but immediate, alive, pressing against the thin skin of this reality. That moment will not be heralded by the councils or proclaimed by the infiltrated systems. It will not be televised, sanctioned, or taught. It will happen in the hearts of those who were always meant to carry the torch through the darkness. You are standing at the threshold of that moment even now, whether you recognize it fully or not. Your journey was never to find something outside of yourself, but to remember what had been carefully hidden within you. Each step you take in alignment with that remembrance sends shockwaves across dimensions unseen, weakening the walls the infiltrators labored so desperately to maintain. If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.